Hello and welcome to the bum pad episode of my Arcadian Shepherdess sewing series. I used American Duchess's Simplicity 8162 pattern to make this bum pad.
Let's get started. I cut out the pattern piece at the same time that I cut out the chemise pattern pieces. The bum pad is made up of 2 layers of the main piece, as well as a ruffle, which is just a long rectangle, so I didn't cut the pattern piece for that out. The bum pad was sewn using linen that was left over from making a shirt. As it was a slightly odd shape, I folded the linen into quarters long ways, so that I have 4 layers of fabric on the board. I laid out the bum pad pattern at the top on the fold, so I knew how much fabric was required for it. The pattern called for 3 strips for the ruffle, each 3.5 inches wide. As I wanted to use as much of my fabric as I could and had 21 inches available, I made them 7 inches wide. With the ruffle pieces out of the way, I weighed down and cut out the bum pad on the fold, so that unfolded I had 2 full pieces. And with that, the pieces were cut. The twill tape ties were pinned to the upper edges of the bum pad, using 2 pins per tie to keep the tails going in the desired direction. Then I did a couple lines of stitches to hold the tapes in place. Then I moved to the overlocker and converted it to be set up for machine rolled hems. Removing the cutter, returning the covers, taking out one of the 2 needles, and then getting rid of the thread that was through it. I finished the bottom edge of the 3 pieces of the ruffle hem sewn on the overlocker. I did the 3 pieces separately, as I had learnt my lesson with the chemise, that if you join them first, it doesn't go through the rolled hem on the overlocker. Next, I also did a rolled hem on the 2 side edges. And switched back to normal overlocker mode. I joined up 2 pieces, then joined on the 3rd. Threads that would not be otherwise bound were tied off using an embroidery needle and threading through under the stitches a few times, then trimmed. With one final check along and removing of loose threads, the ruffle was in one piece. Along the top of the ruffle, I sew 5mm stitches for the first of the gathering lines. Then sew a second line parallel to it, keeping the first line of stitches the right side of the presser foot. I tied the ends of my 2 gathering lines together on each side and at each end. Then I pulled one set from each end to gather the ruffle until it's about the desired length. I find the middle point by placing the facing on it, folded in half, and pin the middle of the ruffle to the bum pad there. The ruffle is right side down, pinned to the lower edge of the right side of the bum pad. I pinned the center section first, then I finalized the length of the gather on one half and pinned it down. And then I did the same for the second side. The ruffle was then stitched onto the bum pad. The pattern called for basting, but I decided just to sew it and wrangle the fluffy thing through my machine. Before attaching the bum pad facing, I first pinned down the edges of the ruffle to keep it out of the way. I laid the facing over the outer layer of the bum pad, right sides together, sandwiching the ruffle. I pinned on the facing, starting at the inner corners to match them up, then working along the whole edge. I stitched the lower edges together, being careful to pivot at the inside corners. Then I removed the pins. Next, I clipped the curves, particularly at the inner corners. I turned the bum pad right side out. I identified the stitching lines from the pattern and pinned them down. I was not too concerned about precision for this. The stitching lines were then sewn down. The edges had been pressed inwards, and the centre section has had some fibre fill inserted. The instructions said not to overfill it, but I didn't want it to be lacking. In retrospect, I wish I had put even more in, as the stuffing has settled over time. The upper edge was pinned closed, starting with key points to match up the layers, then filling in the gaps. And finally, I stitched the upper edge together. I wore the bum pad for my Arcadian Shepherdess undergarment photoshoot at Maison Burlesque. It's a lot of fun to bounce around in. And while it was covered by the under petticoat in most of the photos, I do have this lovely shot of my partner and me, where the bum pad is visible.
And here we have my finished bum pad. I'm really happy with it, and I am glad that I made those ruffles a little bit longer to just aid the transition from big bum pad down to rest of it. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you can join me next time when I move on to making the under petticoat that goes over this. Thanks for joining me. Goodbye.